5 years of devotion. 5 years of cooking his meals, ironing his shirts, and standing in his shadow while he climbed the corporate ladder. When Carter finally discarded her, like an out-of-season coat, he expected tears. He expected screaming. He expected her to beg. But Isabella didn't make a sound. She didn't slam the door, and she didn't send a nasty text. She simply vanished. Carter thought he had won until he tracked her to the airport, expecting to find her crying in a commercial terminal. Instead, he watched the woman he thought he knew board a $65 million Bombardier Global 7500. She didn't say a word when she left him, but those Rolls-Royce engines, they screamed. The breadbasket on the table at Per Se cost more than Isabella's grocery budget for a week. Or at least, that's what Carter liked to joke about. Carter sat across from her, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm against the stem of his wine glass. It was a vintage Cabernet, ordered without asking her preference. He checked his watch, a Rolex Daytona she had saved for 2 years to buy him for his 30th birthday. He checked it again 3 minutes later. "You're quiet tonight," Carter said, though he didn't look up from his phone. The blue light illuminated a face that had grown harder, sharper, and more handsome in the 5 years they had been together. Success wore well on him. "Just tired," Isabella said softly. She adjusted the napkin on her lap. She wasn't tired. She was observant. Isabella knew the signs. A woman knows when the man she loves has mentally vacated the premises. It was the way he angled his body toward the door, the way he changed his passcode 3 weeks ago, the way the name Victoria had started appearing, in his stories always casual, always work-related. Victoria from legal, Victoria who knows the VP, Victoria who thinks I should wear navy suits. "Look, Bella," Carter started, finally setting his phone down. He clasped his hands. It was his closing the deal pose. He used it on clients, at Vanguard Hedges, the boutique private equity firm where he had just made junior partner. "We need to talk about the trajectory of things." Isabella took a sip of water. "Trajectory. Yes. You know how much pressure I'm under right now. The merger with the Kensington Group is massive. It requires a certain image, a certain availability. And I'm not available?" Carter sighed, looking at her with a mix of pity and annoyance. She was wearing a simple cream dress she'd had for years. No jewelry, minimal makeup. To him, she looked like the struggling library archivist he'd met in a coffee shop 5 years ago. Reliable, safe, dull. "You're great, Bella. You really are. But my world is changing. I'm moving into circles that are, let's be honest, a bit above your comfort zone." Isabella didn't blink. "Above my comfort zone. Victoria, she's the daughter of the Kensington CEO. You know, she mentioned that. At the gala last week, you looked overwhelmed." Isabella remembered the gala. She remembered standing quietly by the bar while Carter ignored her for 3 hours to laugh at Victoria's jokes. She remembered Victoria looking her up and down, sneering at her off-rack shoes, and asking if she was Carter's assistant. "So, what are you saying, Carter?" Isabella asked. Her voice was steady, no tremble. Carter exhaled, looking relieved that she was making it easy. "I think we need to separate. I've already spoken to the landlord at our apartment. I'll keep the lease. I've found a nice studio for you in Queens. I'll pay the first 6 months. It's the least I can do." He slid a manila envelope across the white tablecloth. "It's a check," he whispered, lowering his voice so the diners at the next table, the CEO of a major tech firm and his wife, wouldn't hear, and a non-disclosure agreement. Just standard stuff. Since I work in high finance now, I can't have ex-girlfriends talking about my private life. It could spook investors." Isabella looked at the envelope. Then she looked at Carter. She saw the boy she had nursed through the flu. The man whose student loans she had quietly paid off, using savings she claimed were from an inheritance from her grandmother. She saw a man who believed, with every fiber of his being, that he had outgrown her. He expected a scene. He had prepared for a drink to be thrown. He had his speech ready about how she was being hysterical and how this proved she wasn't cut out for his world. Isabella reached out and took the envelope. She didn't open it. She slipped it into her tote bag. Okay, she said. Carter blinked. Okay, I understand. The trajectory has changed. Right. Exactly. Carter looked confused, his script useless. So, you're not angry? Carter, she said, standing up. She smoothed her dress. You are exactly the man I always suspected you would become. She didn't wait for the check. She didn't ask for the studio apartment key. She turned and walked out of the dining room of Per Se. Carter watched her go, a smirk slowly forming on his face. Easier than I thought, he told himself, picking up his wine. She knows her place. He texted Victoria. Done. She's gone. Meet me at the Pierre? He had no idea that the woman walking out of the restaurant had just triggered a sequence of events that would dismantle his entire reality. The apartment in Tribeca was technically Carter's. His name was on the lease, and he paid the rent. Now, though, for the first 3 years, when he was an unpaid intern, the rent had mysteriously been paid by an anonymous guarantor he assumed was his uncle. Isabella entered the code 1987, his birth year. Narcissist to the end. The space was cold, modern, and filled with the chrome and leather furniture Carter felt signaled success. Isabella moved through the rooms with the efficiency of a forensic cleaner. She didn't take the television. She didn't take the blender. She didn't take the clothes he had bought her. The flashy, logo-heavy items he insisted she wear to look rich. She left the Gucci belt. She left the Louis Vuitton bag that she hated because the monogram was too loud. She walked into the walk-in closet and pulled a single, battered leather trunk from the very back, hidden behind his rows of Brooks Brothers suits. It was a Goyard trunk, vintage 1930s. If Carter knew anything about actual luxury, he would have known that this single trunk was worth more than his car. But Carter only knew brands he saw in rap videos or GQ ads. He didn't know old money. Isabella opened it. Inside were the things she had hidden. A passport in the name Isabella Sterling. A Patek Philippe Calatrava watch engraved, to Bella, on your 18th. Love, Papa. A Black American Express Centurion card, the real one, made of titanium, not the platinum one Carter bragged about. She packed her real clothes. These weren't the polyester blends Carter thought she wore. They were Loro Piana cashmere sweaters, in neutral tones, vicuña wool trousers, things that whispered wealth rather than screamed it. She worked in silence. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the Sub-Zero fridge. She stripped the bed. She placed the key to the apartment on the kitchen counter. Beside it, she placed the manila envelope he had given her at dinner. She didn't tear up the check. She simply wrote 3 words on the front of the envelope in her elegant cursive, "Keep the change." She pulled out her phone. It was an old iPhone 11, cracked screen, another part of the disguise. She powered it off and left it on the counter. From the bottom of the Goyard trunk, she pulled out a satellite phone. She dialed a number that had been saved in her memory since she was a child. Operations. A crisp British voice answered after one ring. "It's Isabella," she said. Her voice changed. The softness, the hesitation of the mouse Carter knew, evaporated. In its place was the steel of a woman raised in boardrooms. "I'm ready for extraction." "Miss Sterling," the voice said, sounding relieved. "It's been a long time. Your father has been concerned." "I know, Alfred. I'm done. The experiment is over." "Very good. Location? Tribeca. I need a pickup in 15 minutes. And the destination?" Isabella looked around the apartment one last time. She looked at the framed photo of her and Carter on the mantelpiece, taken 3 years ago in Central Park. He was looking at the camera. She was looking at him. "Home," she said. "Zurich first, then the island." "Understood. The car is 2 minutes away." "And Miss Sterling?" "Yes? Shall we prep the Global 7500 or the Gulfstream?" "The Global. I want to sleep." "And Alfred?" "Yes, ma'am? Make sure the tail number is visible. I have a feeling I might be followed." It was a gamble, but she knew Carter. He was possessive. Even though he had discarded her, the moment he realized she hadn't gone to the studio in Queens, the moment he realized his mouse was off the grid, he would track her. He used the Find My Friends app religiously to spy on her. She left the old phone on, tracking active. She took the elevator down to the service entrance. A blacked-out SUV was waiting. Not a Uber, not a Lyft. It was a Mercedes Maybach GLS 600. The driver, a man the size of a vending machine, stepped out and opened the door. "Miss Sterling," he nodded. "Evening, Rocco." As the heavy door thudded shut, sealing her in a cocoon of soundproofed leather and ambient lighting, Isabella exhaled. For 5 years, she had played the role of Isabella Miller, the orphan from Ohio. She had wanted to be loved for herself, not her name, not her billions. She had found her answer. She wasn't loved, she was used. "Teterboro Airport, Rocco," she said, "and don't spare the gas." Back in the apartment, Carter's phone buzzed. He was in the back seat of a taxi with Victoria, laughing as she critiqued his tie. He looked at the notification. "Isabella Miller has stopped sharing location." He frowned. "That's weird." "What is it, babe?" Victoria asked, tracing his jawline. "My ex. She turned off her location. She's supposed to be going to Queens." He opened the app. The last ping wasn't Queens. It was Teterboro. "Teterboro?" Carter laughed nervously. "Why would she be going to the private airport? She probably took the wrong bus." "Maybe she's stalking you," Victoria teased. "Maybe she thinks you're flying out." Carter's ego flared. "She's crazy. She's probably going to try to make a scene at the fence." "Driver, change of plans. Take us to Teterboro. I need to handle this before she embarrasses me." "Carter, seriously? It'll take 20 minutes. I want to make sure she knows it's really over. Plus," he smirked, "I want to see the look on her face when she sees I'm with you." The taxi swerved toward the Holland Tunnel. Carter thought he was chasing a desperate ex-girlfriend. He didn't know he was chasing a ghost. The taxi ride to Teterboro Airport was a masterclass in tension. The driver, a weary man who had seen everything in New York, kept his eyes on the road, while Victoria complained about the smell of the upholstery. Carter, however, was glued to his phone. He was frantically refreshing Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn. Nothing. Isabella Miller had scrubbed herself from the internet in the span of an hour. It was annoying. It was inconvenient. It was impressive? No, he corrected himself. It was childish. "Carter, this is ridiculous," Victoria sighed, scrolling through her own phone. "We're chasing a girl who buys her clothes at Target to a private airport. Do you know how stupid we're going to look? Security is going to laugh at us." "She's up to something," Carter muttered, his jaw tight. "She took the check. She took the NDA. Why is she here? I bet she's trying to catch a guy. Maybe she's waiting outside the FBO to harass some celebrity. I need to get that check back before she does something to embarrass me." They arrived at the entrance of Meridian Teterboro, one of the most exclusive fixed-base operators, FBOs, on the airfield. The parking lot was filled with Range Rovers, Porsche Cayennes, and S-Class Mercedes. The taxi looked like a rusted tin can amidst the heavy iron. Carter jumped out before the car fully stopped, marching toward the glass doors, with Victoria trailing behind, struggling in her heels. Inside, the lobby smelled of expensive leather and freshly brewed espresso. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that money buys. A receptionist with perfect posture and a headset looked up as Carter burst in. "Sir?" she asked, her voice cool and professional. "I'm looking for a woman," Carter demanded, leaning over the high marble counter, short, brown hair, dragging a beat-up suitcase. She would have just walked in here, maybe looking lost. The receptionist didn't blink. "Sir, we value the privacy of our clients. Unless you are a scheduled passenger, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside." "I'm not a passenger. I'm a junior partner at Vanguard Hedges," Carter said, flashing his business card as if it were a badge. "And the woman I'm looking for is having a mental health crisis. She's my former assistant. I'm here to help her." Victoria rolled her eyes from the doorway. "God, Carter, let it go." The receptionist glanced at the computer screen, then back at Carter. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "I see. Well, the only passengers currently departing are boarding at Hangar 4. You can see the tarmac from the side gate, but you cannot go out there. TSA regulations. Fine, Carter snapped. He grabbed Victoria's hand. Come on. They ran around the side of the building to the chain-link fence that separated the public parking from the operational tarmac. The wind was whipping across the flat concrete, carrying the sharp, chemical scent of Jet A-1 fuel. There, Carter pointed, his finger trembling with adrenaline. About 100 yards away, under the harsh glare of the floodlights, sat a beast of a machine. It wasn't the small Cessna or Learjet Carter might have expected to see a mid-tier CEO renting. It was a Bombardier Global 7500, a $70 million ultra-long-range business jet. It was sleek, white, with a midnight blue stripe running down the fuselage. The tail number N180IS was painted in gold. The engines were already spooling up, a high-pitched whine that vibrated in Carter's chest. "That's a big plane," Victoria said, her voice suddenly hushed. That's billionaire territory, Carter. She's probably a flight attendant," Carter said quickly, laughing nervously. "Yeah, that's it. She never told me, but she must have gotten a job as a stewardess. That's why she's here." Then, a black Mercedes Maybach rolled onto the tarmac, bypassing security checkpoints entirely. It pulled right up to the red carpet that had been rolled out to the jet's air stairs. The driver got out. It was the giant man, Rocco. He opened the back door. Isabella stepped out. From 100 yards away, Carter watched. He saw her silhouette against the hangar lights. She wasn't wearing a flight attendant uniform. She was wearing a trench coat that flowed in the wind and sunglasses, despite it being night. Rocco bowed his head. He didn't hand her a tray of drinks to load. He handed her a phone and took her tote bag, the one with the fake Louis Vuitton monogram, handling it like it contained the crown jewels. "Wait," Carter whispered. "Why is the driver bowing?" Isabella paused at the bottom of the stairs. She turned. For a second, just a split second, she looked toward the fence. It was impossible for her to see him in the dark, through the chain links, but Carter felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the wind. She didn't wave. She didn't cry. She turned back, grabbed the handrail, and ascended the stairs with a grace he had never seen in their 5 years together. "She's boarding?" Victoria said, sounding stunned. "She's the passenger, Carter. She's the only passenger." "No." Carter shook his head, his reality fracturing. "No, that's impossible. She coupons. She buys generic cereal. She fixed my socks with a sewing kit because we couldn't afford new ones." The cabin door of the Global 7500 sealed shut with a thud that echoed across the tarmac. The stairs retracted. The massive Rolls-Royce Pearl engines roared to life, the sound escalating from a whine to a thunderous growl. The jet taxied smoothly, turning its tail toward the fence where Carter stood. "Cover your eyes." Victoria shrieked as the wash hit them. A blast of hot air and the smell of kerosene slammed into Carter, blowing his tie over his shoulder and forcing him to grab the fence to stay upright. It was a physical slap in the face. He watched as the jet accelerated down the runway. It lifted off effortlessly, banking sharply to the east, climbing toward the stratosphere, leaving Carter standing in the exhaust fumes of the woman he had just fired from his life. He looked at the empty tarmac. He looked at the check he still had in his mental image, the $5,000 severance he had given her. "Who the hell was that?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling. Carter stared at the red navigation lights, disappearing into the clouds. "I don't know," he whispered. "I really don't know." Monday morning, at Vanguard Hedges, was usually a symphony of aggressive typing, shouting into headsets, and the clinking of espresso cups. But today, the atmosphere in the glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor was grave. Carter sat near the end of the mahogany table, nursing a coffee he hadn't touched. He looked terrible. He hadn't slept. He had spent the last 36 hours scouring the internet for Isabella Miller and finding nothing but dead ends. He had even driven past the studio apartment in Queens he had rented for her. It was empty. The landlord said the key had been returned by courier with a note, "Not needed." Carter, Focus, Mr. Hedges snapped. Hedges was the senior partner, a man who usually exuded confidence. Today he looked sweaty. He kept adjusting his tie and checking the video conferencing system. Sorry, sir. Carter sat up straight. Just allergies. Well, take a Claritin. We need to be sharp. The Kensington merger is on the line, but there's a complication. Kensington merger of a gun. The room went silent. The Kensington Group was the target, a massive conglomerate of luxury hotels and shipping interests. Acquiring it would make Vanguard Hedges a major player on Wall Street. What kind of complication? Asked Victoria, who was sitting across from Carter, looking perfectly put together, though she had been giving Carter side-eye all morning. The Kensington Group isn't actually owned by the board, Hedges explained, pulling up a slide on the projector. It's a subsidiary, a holding company. Owned by who? Carter asked. The Sterling Family Trust, Hedges said, his voice dropping an octave. A murmur went through the room. The Sterlings. They were old money, not tech billionaire money, not celebrity money. They were railroad, steel, and shipping money. They were the kind of family that didn't appear on Forbes lists because they paid people to keep their names off them. I thought the patriarch, Archibald Sterling, died last year, Victoria noted. He did, Hedges said, clicking to the next slide. And control of the trust has passed to his sole heir, his granddaughter. She's been living in anonymity for the last few years, apparently part of some grounding exercise her grandfather insisted on before she took the reins. She wanted to understand the value of $1 or some such nonsense. Carter's stomach gave a violent lurch. The coffee threatened to come up. Grounding exercise. Value of $1. Anonymous. We have a meeting with her proxy today, via video link, to get approval for the merger, Hedges said. But rumor has it, she might dial in herself. If she does, you all need to be on your best behavior. This woman controls assets worth more than the GDP of Switzerland. She is not to be trifled with. The screen at the head of the table flickered to life. The logo of Sterling Global appeared, a golden lion holding a key. Then, the video feed connected. It was a boardroom in Zurich. The view out the window behind the table showed the Swiss Alps and Lake Zurich. Sitting at the head of the table was an older British man, Alfred, the voice on the phone. Good morning, gentlemen and ladies, Alfred said. I am Alfred Pennyworth, advisor to the trust. Mr. Pennyworth, Hedges smiled, his voice syrupy. An honor. We are ready to present our strategy for the Kensington acquisition. Yes, about that, Alfred interrupted gently. The chairwoman has reviewed your proposal. She has some reservations about the leadership culture at Vanguard Hedges. Culture? Hedges blinked. We are a top-tier firm. We value integrity, hard work. The chairwoman values a character, Alfred said. She believes that how a man treats the little people is how he will treat his shareholders. Carter felt the blood drain from his face. His hands were shaking under the table. She would like to speak to the junior partner leading this deal, Alfred said. Mr. Carter Davis, is he present? All eyes turned to Carter. Hedges beamed, patting Carter on the shoulder. Yes, Carter is our rising star. He's right here. Excellent, Alfred said. One moment. Alfred moved his laptop slightly. The camera angle shifted. A woman walked into the frame. She was wearing a white power suit that cost more than Carter's car. Her hair was cut in a sharp, chic bob, different from the messy bun she used to wear, but the face was undeniable. She sat down. She looked directly into the camera lens. Her eyes were cold, hard, and familiar. It was Isabella. But it wasn't the Isabella who clipped coupons. It wasn't the Isabella who rubbed his feet after work. This was Isabella Sterling. The room in New York went dead silent. Hello, Carter, she said. Her voice was crystal clear, amplified by the high-tech speakers. Bella? Carter squeaked. It was a pathetic sound. Hedges looked from the screen to Carter. You know Miss Sterling? Carter stammered. We used to know each other. Isabella smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Mr. Davis and I cohabited for 5 years in New York, until last Friday night, actually. When he explained to me that his trajectory had outgrown my, what was the phrase, comfort zone, Victoria audibly gasped. Hedges looked like he was having a stroke. Carter tried to speak, but his throat was dry as sand. Mr. Hedges, Isabella said, turning her gaze to the senior partner, your associate attempted to buy my silence and my dignity with a check for $5,000 and a studio apartment in Queens. He told me that to succeed in high finance, he needed a partner who fit the image. She paused, leaning forward. I am currently reviewing the Kensington merger, and I have to say, I am struggling to see the value in a firm that employs men who can't recognize a diamond because they are too busy looking for glitter. Ms. Sterling, Hedges stuttered. I had no idea. This is a personal matter. Business is personal, Mr. Hedges. Isabella cut him off. My grandfather taught me that. You invest in people. And frankly, your rising star is a bad investment. He lacks judgment. He lacks loyalty. And worst of all, he lacks taste. She picked up a piece of paper from the table in Zurich. I am rejecting the merger, Isabella said calmly. Furthermore, the Sterling Trust will be pulling its current assets from Vanguard Hedges. We are moving our portfolio to Goldman Sachs, effective immediately. Wait, Hedges screamed, standing up. That's 40% of our liquidity. You can't just... I can, Isabella said. That's the beauty of the trajectory, Mr. Hedges. It can change very quickly. She looked at Carter one last time. Oh, and Carter? Carter looked up, his eyes filled with tears of panic. I never cashed the check, but I did keep the change. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, no one moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Then, Hedges turned to Carter. The veins in his neck were bulging. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Get out, Hedges whispered. Sir, Get out, Hedges roared, throwing his coffee mug against the wall. It shattered, splattering dark liquid all over the framed awards. You didn't just dump a girl, you idiot. You dumped the Kensington Group. You dumped the Sterling fortune. Get out of my building before I throw you out the window. Carter stood up, his legs wobbling. He grabbed his briefcase. He didn't look at Victoria. He didn't look at his colleagues. He walked out of the conference room, past the reception desk, and to the elevator. As the doors closed, he saw the receptionist watching him. It was the same look the woman at the airport had given him. Pity, and a little bit of amusement. Carter Davis pressed the button for the lobby. He was going down, and he had a feeling he wouldn't stop falling for a very long time. The sidewalk outside the Vanguard Hedges building on 6th Avenue was cold, but the chill Carter felt came from within. He was holding a cardboard box containing a stapler, a gym bag, and the shattered remains of his Employee of the Month mug. He stood there, waiting for Victoria. They were supposed to go to lunch at Le Bernardin after the meeting. Surely she would understand. Surely she would see that he was a victim of a cruel deception. The revolving doors spun. Victoria emerged, typing furiously on her phone. She didn't look like a supportive girlfriend. She looked like a woman doing damage control. Vic, Carter called out, stepping toward her. Hey, look, it's a mess, but I can fix this. I just need to call some contacts at J.P. Morgan. I'll land on my feet. Victoria stopped. She looked at him over the rim of her sunglasses. It was the look one gives to a piece of gum stuck to a shoe. Carter, she said, her voice devoid of affection. Delete my number. What? Babe? Come on. It's just a setback. A setback is missing a quarterly target, Victoria snapped. You were publicly eviscerated by the heiress to the Sterling fortune. You're radioactive. Do you know what the partners are saying upstairs? They're saying you're a liability. The Kensington deal is dead because of you. But she lied to me, Carter pleaded, his voice cracking. She pretended to be poor. That's entrapment or something. She didn't pretend to be poor, Carter. She was just herself. You were just too shallow to notice. She had class because she wasn't wearing a neon Balenciaga hoodie. Victoria hailed a cab. I date partners, Carter, not unemployed analysts, with a reputation for being blind. She got in the cab and slammed the door. Carter watched her drive away, just as he had watched Isabella fly away. But this time, there was no mystery, just the brutal math of transactional relationships. By Wednesday, the Sterling effect had taken full hold. Carter called every headhunter in the city. The conversations were identical. Carter Davis? Yes. Look, right now the market is tight. We heard about the Vanguard situation. We can't touch you. Honestly, Carter, you might want to look in a different industry or a different city. Have you considered Omaha? By Friday, the eviction notice came for his apartment. Carter had been leveraging his credit cards to pay the exorbitant rent, banking on his year-end bonus. There would be no bonus. Desperate, Carter decided to go on the offensive. He was an American man, and when American men felt wronged, they sued. He found a lawyer, not a high-end corporate shark, but a strip mall attorney in New Jersey named Saul. "We sue for fraud," Carter explained, pacing in Saul's small, dusty office. "She misled me. I supported her for 5 years. I paid for her food. I paid for our apartment. That's palimony or something, right? She's a billionaire. She owes me back pay for lifestyle maintenance." Saul chewed his pen. "You want to sue Isabella Sterling, the head of the Sterling Trust?" "Yes, she played me." Saul sent the letter. A demand for $5 million in emotional distress and reimbursement of living expenses. The response arrived 48 hours later. It didn't come by mail. It was hand-delivered by a courier from Sullivan and Cromwell, one of the most terrifying law firms on the planet. Carter opened the thick envelope in the lobby of the gym he could no longer afford. Inside was a single letter and a comprehensive spreadsheet. "Dear Mr. Davis, we are in receipt of your frivolous demand. Please find attached an itemized accounting of the last 5 years." Carter flipped the page. His jaw dropped. It was a forensic accounting of their relationship. Asterisk, rent, Tribeca, apartment. Paid by Carter Davis. Value, $5,200, month. Asterisk, anonymous guarantor. Fees, paid to secure said apartment lease for Mr. Davis when his credit score was insufficient in 2019. Paid by IS Trust. Value, $15,000. Asterisk, student loan repayment, Carter Davis, University of Pennsylvania. Paid via anonymous donor shell company, Blue Heron, LLC. Source, Isabella Sterling personal account. Value, $142,000. Asterisk, medical bills, Carter Davis, emergency appendectomy, 2021. Paid out of pocket by Isabella Sterling. Value, $28,000. The list went on. The tailored suits he thought he got on sale? She had subsidized the tailor. The car insurance? She paid it. The final page was a summary. Total contribution by Mr. Davis, $184,000. Total contribution by Miss Sterling, undisclosed, $410,000. Miss Sterling is willing to forgive the balance of $226,000 that you effectively owe her, provided you never speak her name, approach her, or attempt to contact her again. If you pursue legal action, we will countersue for the balance plus legal fees, which we estimate will run into the millions. Choose wisely. Carter dropped the papers. He hadn't been supporting her. She had been keeping him afloat. She was the wind beneath his wings, and he had been too busy looking in the mirror to notice the draft. He walked out of the gym. He went to a pawn shop on 8th Avenue. He took off the Rolex Daytona. "How much?" Carter asked, his voice hollow. The pawnbroker looked at it. "No box? No papers?" "I lost them. 6 grand. It's worth 30. Not to me. Take it or leave it." Carter took the cash. It was enough to put a deposit on a studio apartment, not in Manhattan, not even in a trendy part of Brooklyn. Carter moved to the exact neighborhood in Queens where he had tried to banish Isabella. The irony was a bitter pill, and he swallowed it every morning with his instant coffee. 8 months later, New York City was gearing up for the event of the season, the Metropolitan Charity Ball. Tickets were $50,000 a head. The theme was Gilded Age Renaissance. It was a night for the masters of the universe to pat themselves on the back. Carter adjusted his bow tie. It was a clip-on. It was tight, itchy, and smelled faintly of someone else's sweat. He wasn't inside drinking champagne. He was outside, standing on the curb of Fifth Avenue, wearing a red vest with the logo Prestige Valet Services stitched on the breast. This was his life now. The finance world was a small village, and word traveled fast. He was unhireable. He had tried sales, but his arrogance came through in interviews. He had tried real estate, but he couldn't close. He eventually ran out of money and options. Now, he parked cars for the people he used to have drinks with. "Yo, new guy," the shift manager shouted. "Keep the lane clear. We got VIPs incoming." "I got it," Carter muttered, keeping his head down. He wore a cap pulled low. He prayed no one would recognize him. A procession of limousines and hypercars began to arrive. Carter opened the door of a Bentley. Out stepped a managing director from Goldman Sachs. Carter stiffened, turning his face away as he handed the man a claim ticket. The man didn't even look at him. To them, Carter was just furniture. Then, the hush fell over the crowd of paparazzi. "Heads up," the manager hissed. "The Sterling convoy is here. Don't scratch anything or I'll kill you." The Sterling convoy. Carter's heart hammered against his ribs. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide in the parking garage, but he couldn't. He needed this shift. He needed the tips to pay his electric bill. 3 black SUVs pulled up, flanking a long, custom-built Rolls-Royce Phantom extended wheelbase. It was a deep, midnight blue, the same color as the stripe on her jet. Security guards with earpieces hopped out of the SUVs, scanning the crowd. They pushed the paparazzi back. The rear door of the Phantom opened. First came the shoe, a Christian Louboutin heel, encrusted with crystals. Then, the dress. It was a flowing, shimmering silver gown that looked like liquid mercury. Isabella Sterling stepped out. She was radiant. She looked powerful. She looked like a queen returning to her court. The flashbulbs went off like a supernova, blinding white light exploding around her. She wasn't alone. A man stepped out from the other side. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. He was a European duke or a tech mogul. Carter didn't know, but he looked like an adult. He looked like an equal. Isabella took the man's arm, smiling for the cameras. It was a genuine smile. One Carter hadn't seen in years because he had never given her a reason to use it. The manager shoved Carter. "Go! Get the Phantom! Move!" Carter stumbled forward. He had to take the keys from the driver. He approached the massive car. Isabella was standing just 3 feet away, posing for a photo. She turned to adjust her train. Her eyes swept over the red-vested valets. Her gaze stopped. She saw him. Carter froze. He was holding the door handle of her car. He looked ragged. He had lost weight. His eyes were dark with exhaustion. He was wearing a cheap polyester uniform. Isabella looked at him. Carter waited for the anger. He waited for the sneer. He waited for her to point him out to the security guards and have him removed. He waited for her to laugh. But she didn't laugh. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. Her expression was completely blank. It was the look you give a stranger on the subway. It was the look you give a fire hydrant or a street sign. She looked through him. "Isabella?" her date asked, leaning in. "Everything all right?" Isabella blinked, breaking eye contact with Carter, as if he were nothing more than a smudge on a window. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying over the noise of the crowd. "Just thought I recognized someone, but I was mistaken." She turned her back on him. "Shall we go in?" she asked her date. "After you, my dear." Isabella Sterling walked up the red carpet, the flashbulbs lighting her path. She didn't look back, not once. Carter stood there, the keys to her Rolls-Royce, heavy in his hand. "Hey, buddy, move the car!" the manager screamed. Carter scrambled into the driver's seat of the Phantom. The interior smelled of jasmine and leather, her scent. It was overwhelming. He put the car in gear and drove it toward the garage ramp. Tears blurred his vision. If she had yelled at him, it would have meant she still cared. If she had mocked him, It would have meant he still had power over her emotions. But she hadn't. She had looked at him and seen nothing. He wasn't an ex-boyfriend. He wasn't an enemy. He was just the help. He had told her she wasn't part of his trajectory. Now, he was just a bystander in hers. Carter parked the car in the dark, underground garage. He turned off the engine. He sat in the silence of the luxury car he would never own, gripping the steering wheel, and for the first time in his life, he understood the true cost of silence. The engine of the Rolls-Royce Phantom ticked softly as it cooled in the subterranean darkness of the parking garage. Carter sat in the driver's seat for a long time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 20. The leather was soft, the kind of softness that didn't just happen. It was engineered. The scent of jasmine, Isabella's signature, wasn't just a perfume anymore. It was a ghost. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The dim garage lighting was unforgiving. It showed the gray hairs sprouting at his temples, the lines of stress etched around his mouth, the hollowness of his cheeks. He wasn't the golden boy of Vanguard hedges anymore. He was just a man in a red polyester vest, parking a car for a woman who used to fold his laundry. He remembered the day he broke up with her. He remembered the feeling of superiority, the absolute certainty that he was the protagonist of the movie and she was just a supporting character written out of the script. He had thought he was upgrading. He had thought he was shedding dead weight. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. The silence in the car was deafening. It was heavier than any scream, sharper than any insult. Isabella hadn't ruined him. That was the hardest pill to swallow. She hadn't sued him into oblivion, though she could have. She hadn't planted stories in the press to destroy his reputation, though she had the connections to do so. She hadn't even gotten him fired directly. She simply refused to do business with a man she didn't respect, and the market had done the rest. She had simply outgrown him, and she had done it without a single word of malice. Carter opened the door and stepped out. He looked at the car one last time, the physical manifestation of the distance between them. He closed the door with a soft, solid thud. He walked back up the ramp, handed the keys to the manager, and clocked out. He didn't finish the shift. He walked into the cool New York night, the sounds of the city washing over him, and for the first time in his life, he felt entirely, completely small. 7 years later, the rain in Columbus, Ohio, was different from the rain in New York. It didn't bounce off concrete canyons. It soaked into the earth, turning everything a dull, flat gray. Carter Davis adjusted the manager name tag on his shirt. It was a reputable dealership, Midwest Motors. They sold sensible sedans and reliable SUVs to sensible, reliable people. It was a good job. It paid the mortgage on his small 2-bedroom townhouse. It allowed him to buy a craft beer on Fridays and maybe catch a movie. It was a life. A quiet, invisible life. The showroom was slow today. The rain kept customers away. Carter stood by the coffee machine, watching the sales floor. At the front desk, a young salesman named Ryan was arguing on his cell phone. Ryan was 24, ambitious, and wearing a suit that was a little too shiny. He reminded Carter so much of himself that it sometimes made his stomach ache. "Look, babe, I can't," Ryan was saying, his voice carrying across the quiet room. "I have to stay late. The regional manager is coming in tomorrow. You can take the bus, can't you? It's not that big a deal." Carter watched as Ryan rolled his eyes, listening to the person on the other end. "Stop crying, okay? You're being dramatic. I'm doing this for us. I'm building a career here. You don't get the vision." The words hit Carter like a physical blow. "You don't get the vision." Carter set his coffee down. He walked across the showroom floor. His steps were measured, heavy. "Ryan," Carter said. The young man looked up, startled. He covered the phone. "Boss? Just a sec. Just dealing with." "Hang up," Carter said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a density to it that made Ryan freeze. What?" "Tell her you'll pick her up, and then hang up the phone." Ryan blinked, confused by the intensity in his manager's eyes. Okay. Hey, babe, I'll come get you." "Yeah, bye." He hung up and looked at Carter with a defensive smirk. "Sorry about that, boss. She just doesn't understand the grind, you know? She thinks I can just leave whenever. But I've got a trajectory. I'm going places. Carter leaned against the desk. He looked at this kid, this arrogant, foolish kid who thought the world owed him a favor because he put on a tie. You think she's holding you back? Carter said. It wasn't a question. I mean, kinda, Ryan shrugged. She's sweet, but she's just simple. She's happy with whatever. I want the big life. I want the penthouse. I want the jet. Carter let out a short, dry laugh. The jet. Yeah, that's the dream, right? Carter looked out the window, at the rain, falling on the rows of Ford Explorers and Honda Civics. Let me tell you something, Ryan. Something I learned the hard way. Carter crossed his arms. You think the person standing quietly beside you is weak. You think because they don't demand things, they don't have value. You think you're the sun, and they're just a planet orbiting you. Ryan frowned. I guess. But you're wrong, Carter said softly. They aren't the planet. They're the gravity. They're the thing holding you to the earth so you don't float off and suffocate in space. And the moment you cut that gravity, you don't fly, Ryan. You drift. You drift into the cold and the dark, and you realize that simple girl was the only thing making you real. Ryan stared at him. He had never heard his boss talk like this. Carter was usually all about numbers, quotas, and inventory. You treat her like she's the prize, Carter said, his voice hardening. Because if you don't, one day you're going to turn around, and she'll be gone. And she won't scream. She won't fight. She'll just leave. And the silence she leaves behind? It will be the loudest thing you ever hear. Ryan looked down at his phone. He looked back at Carter. Is that what happened to you? Carter didn't answer. He just patted the counter. Go pick her up. Take the rest of the afternoon off. But the regional manager, I'll handle it. Go. Ryan grabbed his keys and ran out into the rain. Carter watched him go, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he had saved one idiot from becoming him. The final broadcast. Carter walked back to his office. He sat down and turned on the small TV mounted in the corner to catch the evening news. The local news anchor was droning on about the weather, but then the graphic changed. Breaking news. Global Philanthropy Summit. Carter's hand hovered over the remote to mute it, but he stopped. The footage showed a familiar airfield. It was Zurich, Switzerland. A massive, sleek aircraft was taxiing on the runway. It was a new model, a Bombardier Global, 8000, even bigger and faster than the one from years ago. The tail was painted a deep, royal blue with a golden lion emblem. The reporter's voiceover kicked in. The summit kicked off today with the arrival of Isabella Sterling, chairwoman of the Sterling Trust. Miss Sterling, notoriously private, has just announced a personal donation of $2 billion to clean water initiatives across the developing world. The camera cut to a podium. There she was. Isabella was older now. There were fine lines around her eyes, strands of silver in her dark hair. She looked even more beautiful than she had at 25. She didn't look like a porcelain doll. She looked like iron and silk. She was standing next to a man, not the Duke from the gala, but a man in a field jacket, looking rugged and kind. He was holding her hand, and in her other arm, she held a toddler, a little girl with wild curly hair. Isabella leaned into the microphone. She didn't shout. She didn't use buzzwords. We often talk about what we want to say to the world, Isabella said, her voice calm and steady. We want to make noise. We want to be heard. But I have found that the most important changes happen in the quiet moments. Action doesn't need to scream to be effective. It just needs to be true. She looked down at her husband and smiled. It was a private smile, shared in front of millions. So, let your actions speak, she concluded, and let your love be quiet but unbreakable. The camera pulled back as she walked away from the podium, her family surrounding her. They walked toward the massive jet, the engines beginning to spool up with that familiar, powerful whine. Carter watched the screen. He looked around his small, gray office. He looked at the stack of invoices on his desk. He looked at the cold cup of coffee. He remembered the check he had tried to give her, $5,000. He remembered the studio apartment in Queens. He remembered the silence at the dinner table when he told her she wasn't enough. A single tear rolled down Carter's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He finally understood. She hadn't left him because he wasn't rich. She hadn't left him because of the trajectory. She had left him because he was loud. He was all noise, all ego, all surface. She was the deep ocean, and he was just a paper boat that had convinced itself it was a battleship. On the TV screen, the jet lifted off. It soared into the blue Swiss sky, climbing higher and higher until it was just a speck of gold against the sun. Carter turned off the TV. The office was quiet, but for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like the truth. He picked up his pen and went back to work. And that is the story of Carter and Isabella. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the people we take for granted are the ones holding up our entire world. Carter thought he was the main character, blinded by the flashy lights of success, only to realize too late that true value isn't found in a job title or a bank account, but in the quiet loyalty of someone who loves you. Isabella didn't need to scream to prove her worth. She didn't need to fight to win the breakup. She simply removed her presence, and the vacuum she left behind was more devastating than any revenge plot could ever be. She let the roar of her success and those jet engines do all the talking for her. What did you think of Carter's realization? Do you think he deserved a second chance, or was his punishment fitting? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story hooked you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about karma, revenge, and the hidden lives of the ultra-wealthy, make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate. The quietest person in the room might just be the most powerful. See you in the next video.